there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week on the 302, Black female artists get their due in a traveling exhibit that's now at the Delaware Art Museum called There Is a Woman in Every Color, Black Women in Art. It is a beautiful exhibit of paintings, sculptures, quilts, and so much more. We're going to take a deep dive next on the 302. Welcome to the Delaware Art Museum. We're talking about a very special exhibit that you can see through the end of May called There Is a Woman in Every Color, Black Women in Art. Now I'm joined by Heather Campbell-Coyle to talk to us a little bit about this really diverse and beautiful exhibit. Heather, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. It's such an exciting show. I'm glad to tell you about it.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the very beginning. This started in what, 2020 at a university, is that right?
Yes. So this exhibition was organized for the Bowdoin College Museum of Art by Elizabeth Humphrey, who was working there at that time and who was a Bowdoin graduate. And she wanted to address the lack of images in their art museum day to day of Black women or by Black women. And so she put this exhibition together and in 2020, and it premiered there. And then in 2022, I believe, it went on the road. I think it premiered there in 2021. And it has been traveling for the last 2 years with Art Bridges Foundation support, and we are the final stop. And the show that was traveling was only 43 works, and we have a large exhibition space. So we worked with Elizabeth, who is now conveniently a PhD candidate at the University of Delaware in their art history department. We worked with Elizabeth to expand the show, pulling works from our collection of and by Black women artists.
So that must have been just an amazing, I don't want to say it was a coincidence, but a happy coincidence that you were able to take something that was already so powerful, that was touring the country, and kind of put a local spin on it by using some of your own items. So talk to me a little bit about the collaboration process. And, you know, this is all a conversation, but what conversation are we having here?
Sure. So we were super excited to add our work to the collection and to work with Elizabeth. This is her specialty. It's her project. And this is, how to have an expert come in and look at your collection with fresh eyes is always exciting. So we knew what was in the checklist for the original show, and we sent her various lists from our collection, works that represent Black women, works that are by Black female artists, and invited her to look through. She came in, of course, we got to look through storage, which is always one of the fun things to see everything. And then she came back with a group of works she selected to put in the exhibition. And then we worked together to lay it out, and she even revised some of the themes, adding some new themes to the show in order to fit the works that inspired her in our collection.
And just to reiterate, we're talking, Elizabeth is a Black artist herself, is that right?
A Black curator.
A Black curator, so she's in the art world. So in addition to coming at it from an art perspective and a history perspective, it's also lends itself to the value of identity.
Yes, absolutely. However much I may research and study, it will never be my lived experience, an exhibition like this. So it was really important for us to bring in a guest curator whose experience it was. And of course, perfect to have the sort of serendipity of that curator being present in Delaware and being part of this community to join us to make the show even better.
Absolutely. Now I want to talk to you about the image on the front cover. This front cover of the catalog here. This is a very powerful image. Talk to me a little bit about, first of all, about the image itself, and then we'll go into the title of the show.
Sure. So this image is by Micheline Thomas, and it's What Are You Thinking? And she is a contemporary artist. This work is from 2016. So the work from the show dates from the 1860s through 2021, actually. A very diverse group of artists and a long period of time. But Micklane Thomas is really referencing, although the work is from 2016, she's referencing fashion photography of the 1970s and 80s. So this photograph, which is enormous, as you saw,
it's beautiful.
It has these wonderful layers of pattern and color. You can find a sort of Easter egg of a Diana Ross album in there from 1978. And it brings this sort of 70s energy with that maximalist design. But she's also an artist who is very much influenced by old master paintings. So the woman's pose is taken from a traditional odalisque, a French word for a reclining woman. Those pictures were often made for male viewers' enjoyment. The women were often nude, but the woman in Micklane Thomas's picture is very much confronting the viewer. She's very much a bold, modern woman.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the title of the show. It is taken from a print that you have just right next to this beautiful photograph.
Yes, so the exhibition is titled There is a Woman in Every Color, and that title is taken from a print by Elizabeth Catlett. Elizabeth Catlett is well-known as a sculptor and printmaker. She lived a large part of her life in Mexico, where she began her printmaking career. And this wonderful print pictures a woman. It looks almost like a positive negative photograph in black and white, but then there's a strip along the side where you see all these colors of little female figures that are, and that's where the title comes from.
It really is interesting when you see an artist's interpretation of their world. So we're going to see much more of this interpretation when we come back.
I'm Justin Day from Jessup's Tavern, and I love the vittles on the 302.
Welcome back. We are talking about the wonderful exhibit called There is a Woman in Every Color. We're talking to Heather Campbell Coyle about this beautiful exhibit at the Delaware Art Museum. So let's talk about some of the items. I know we can't show all of the items to folks at home for copyright reasons, but that just means when you come, there's going to be some surprises that you're really going to enjoy. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So this exhibition stretches from work from the 1860s through the present. Most contemporary art is still in copyright. So many of the works can't be shown in this talk, but there's so many fabulous things to come in the gallery and see. Mm-hmm. We were talking just off camera about the Augusta Savage sculpture. Mm-hmm. Augusta Savage was an important artist during the Harlem Renaissance. She educated many other artists, and there is a wonderful small sculpture by her of a little boy called Gamine. And it's a charming work and a historically important work. As I said, she's working during the Harlem Renaissance, when one of the real concerns among many Black artists was to make work that was dignified. Even if you're showing a young boy, even if you're showing a young person who may not be, wealthy, right? Mm-hmm. To show them with dignity. And she does such a beautiful job of that in her sculpture, Gamine.
The expression is just really amazing. And I'm just always blown away whenever an artist is able to capture it, because a lot of times you see portraits and things where it doesn't come to life, but that sculpture really does.
Yes, that was someone she knew, and you can really feel it in there. And it's just such a beautiful expression of childhood as
Excellent. Well. And right behind it, there is this really beautiful, I don't know if it's a ink or if it's a print of this woman dressed in, what I would assume was period attire, and she's a local poet. Can you tell me about her, about that piece?
Sure. So one of the sections that the curator came up with to suit some of the things she was finding in our collection, because the show is arranged thematically, is historical interventions. So looking at taking a lot of contemporary artists who are looking at the past and reconfiguring it, rethinking it. And in some cases, as the case of Charles Edward Williams, who made the beautiful ink drawing that you see there, he's looking at a historical photograph of Alice Dunbar Nelson. Dunbar Nelson was a poet, a publisher, and she was based for a lot of her career, and an educator. She was based for a lot of her career here in Wilmington, Delaware. So Charles Edward Williams went and looked at materials, including an archival photograph that he based that beautiful drawing on, and overlaid over the photograph there's her poem.
Just a beautiful poem. And it's so, if you have to get close to it, and a lot of times when you go to museums, they frown upon you getting close, but you got to get a little closer to this one so you can actually read the lines, because it tells you a lot about the artist. And the fact that there's a local tie. I mean, you guys keep obviously coming back to this richness of locality in this exhibit.
Absolutely. It was really important for us, we're working with Elizabeth to add things, but to reflect the wonderful tradition of what was collected here, which is so often part of the community here. That work was actually commissioned by the museum in 2021 as part of a community-wide celebration of Alice Dunbar Nelson's legacy.
So let's talk about the beaded sculpture. Is that a piece that belongs to the museum, or is that part of the traveling exhibit?
So the beaded sculpture by Joyce Scott is a piece that belongs to the museum. It's been in the museum's collection, I believe, since the late 90s. Mm-hmm. It is intricately beaded, and it's also part of this section on historical interventions. Here, Scott is looking at the traditional figure of the mammy, a sort of stereotype of African-American women whose job was often to take care of white children. Mm-hmm. And in this case, she has recast the idea of the mammy as this African goddess, a very empowered figure with literally her hair on fire. So it's a really exciting visually piece, and stunning to have it out. It hasn't been out in probably 7 or 8 years here, so it's exciting for people to get to see it.
Have you noticed that that is a trend where more modern artists take pieces and images and bits from culture that are inspired, that they're inspired by, and maybe if they're in a subjugated place, kind of give them a place of empowerment? I feel like there's sort of been this trend of reinventing who we are as we, progress through time.
Absolutely. I think there are many artists who are very interested in, whether they are musicians or filmmakers or theater people, who are interested in mining the past in order to tell new stories, because there's always stories that weren't told, and often the stories of Black women were those stories that weren't told.
But we have a lot more stories to tell when we return.
I'm Rebecca Moore, Director of Somerville Manning Gallery, and I love the creativity of the 302.
Welcome back. We're at the Delaware Art Museum talking about an amazing exhibit that you're going to want to check out. It's called There Is a Woman in Every Color, Black Women in Art. Now, we have talked about sculptures, we have talked about historical pictures, that amazing poem, but this runs the gamut. And there's also a lot of abstract art in the show, right?
Absolutely. So the final section of the show is really to express the idea of the diversity of images that are made by women artists, that they don't need to be making images that represent their experience or that represent anything specific, or at least in a really literal way. So there is a wonderful wall or two of abstract pictures, as well as plenty of representational work in the show.
So the one that really kind of pops out, it's pink, it's orange, and it's cherry blossoms, right?
Yes. So one of the real showstoppers of this exhibition is a work by Alma Thomas. Alma Thomas is an incredibly famous, important artist who spent much of her time in Washington, D.C. So appropriately for spring this year, it's great to have her double cherry blossom here, a work from the 1970s that captures her sort of all over patterning, but also makes a real reference to something that is familiar. I mean, immediately when you saw it, you saw...
I said flowers, yeah. But it's an example of what you were saying. Our identity is, we wear our identity as, like clothing, but it's a lot of times who we are is what's on the inside. So she's one of the artists that said, you know what, this is what I want to do.
Right.
Like taking, command of their craft.
Absolutely. So when she's working, it's at a time where there's a lot of pressure on Black artists specifically to be representing the Black American experience. But that was not Alma Thomas's interest. Her interest was in abstract painting, which is also a huge thing in the art world at that point, and particularly in color field painting was a big deal in Washington, D.C., where she's working. So she sticks to her guns and makes wonderful abstract works of art, as do many other artists.
It's really admirable. Now, next to it, you have to get really close to see exactly what this collage of items are. Tell us about the black, collage, as it were.
Yes, so I think Elizabeth did an amazing job by pairing these two works visually, which I would not have thought to. The work that hangs next to the Alma Thomas in the installation is Sonia Clark's Black Cross Worn Thin. Sonia comes from a tradition of working in fibers, and she chooses really interesting objects that she makes. So this work is actually woven from hair combs, from a black, literally called an unbreakable brand comb.
Yeah.
And she has woven it into, and she has broken lots of teeth in order to do it, into this wonderful sculpture that hangs on the wall. And I'm so excited that Sonia Clark will be coming to speak here in the end of April. And we'll get to learn more about this piece, which has been in our collection for some time. So exciting to have her here.
It really is. And when you talk about the themes, there are so many. And I know that for Black women, their hair is often a source of empowerment and discussion. And you see that in some of the pieces. And even with the combs, it's kind of like an homage to that, beauty.
Absolutely. So Sonia Clark is very much consciously engaging with ideals of beauty and of Black women and hair. She's also made an incredible installation of combs that represents Madam C.J. Walker.
Oh.
And she has made work with her own hair and with the hair of others. So that's very much part of her practice, is engaging with those ideas.
Now, I know there's a really beautiful quilt that we can't show because of copyright considerations, but you get to check it out and discover it for yourself. However, the same artist has a poster, as it were. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So there are two works in the exhibition by Faith Ringgold, who actually, as we're filming this, has just passed away, of over 90 years of age, an incredibly important, prolific artist, best known for her story quilts. And the Delaware Art Museum is lucky to have one of these that tells the story of a young girl and her sort of fantasy world where she flies over the rooftops of New York City where she lives. And it has a story that's on it, and there is a book that is based on it. So it's a really wonderful example of her work. Yeah. And then the other Ringgold that's in the show, and really sort of one of the signature images for the exhibition, is Faith Ringgold's Quilting Bee at Arles, where she has taken a series of famous women from Black history, including Ida B. Wells and Sojourner Truth and Mary McLeod Bethune, all sorts of important women from Black history, and she's set them in a quilting bee, but in Arles, in France. And hanging out in the background is none other than Vincent van Gogh.
Wow.
So it's a really fascinating piece, bright and fabulous, and so worth coming in to see that and her quilt.
And it kind of speaks to, a lot of people, when they think of quilts, they think they keep you warm, they're colorful, but in that poster or the painting, is she speaking to quilts as an art form? Because a lot of that, they are an art form.
Right, and also a community activity among African Americans and other rural populations who would have a quilting bee where women would gather. And that work that may not have been historically considered to be fine art, but is certainly an artistic expression created by women.
So if people want to know more, do you have supplemental materials online that will tell them more about the exhibit here?
Absolutely. So they should visit the Delaware Art Museum's website, and you can also, when you're in the exhibition, peruse the catalog for the show. There's A Woman in Every Color, Black Women in Art by Elizabeth Humphrey. And also, if you put those things into Google, you will find a digital version of the exhibition as it originally existed at Bowdoin College.
So a little bit of homework before we come out to see you. Thank you so much, Heather. It's always a pleasure to visit you.
Thanks for coming out.
We'll be right back. Are you enjoying the sneak peek of this exhibit? Well, if you come by, make sure you snap a picture and share it with us on Facebook. Now, here are some other things you might want to check out. For more information on this exhibit or any of the fantastic exhibits here, visit delart.org. That'll do it for this week's episode of The 302. Make sure you follow us on Facebook to get some behind-the-scenes video and information and content you're just not going to get anywhere else. We're going to leave you now with some beautiful bird boxes and blooms here in Wilmington. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302.